Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Well, Sap, the Celtics have finally made a move that is somewhat interesting. I'm not talking about Enes Kanter. I'm not talking about adding guys to their Bruno Fernando to their summer league team. They brought in Dennis Schroder, who you're very familiar with. He played for your Lakers last year on a 1-year, $5 million approximately deal. Schroeder obviously costing himself a significant amount of money, but I think mutually beneficial. He just has to play for 1 year, try to recoup his value. The Celtics get a quality player for a fraction of what people thought he was going to make on the open market at a position of need. Sap, it is a rare podcast where I am pleased with the Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, they got this player who's not an all-star, but he's been a quality sixth man in several of his stops. He was the starting point guard for the Lakers last year, had a good regular season, a horrible postseason. That cost him a lot of money. The Lakers had offered him 4 years, $84 million. So he's lost $78 million by not accepting that offer and then ending up with what the Celtics were able to offer him, which was $5.9 million. So I think the reports are that he's still kind of bewildered. And I wonder if that's going to carry onto the court, because now this is a make good contract, right? So Dennis Schroeder is going to have to try to prove that he's worth 4 years, $84 million again, after turning that down by the Lakers. And how is that going to impact the Celtics? Is he going to be out there playing for himself, or is he going to be playing the role of point guard who's going to try to make Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown look better? How's he going to mesh with Marcus Smart? Is Marcus Smart going to return? He's got 1 year left on his deal. We hear the Celtics are offering him 4 years at $18 million plus a year.
Yeah, 77
million a year.
Like
yeah, so I mean, plenty of money for Marcus Smart. So how's that going to work? And now you've got a rookie head coach in Ime Udoka who's going to be dealing with Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum, but also Marcus Smart and Dennis Schroeder. So this is going to be interesting to see. Is he going to come here and say, look, I got to put up 18, 19 points a game. I'm going to force the issue, because if I do that and I'm, not quite an all-star, but I can up my value, that maybe next off season, a big deal will come his way. I also think that he could be one of those guys that, unless he's playing at a very high level, he's a turnoff for teams. He seems to be somewhat of a handful, right? I mean, when he went to the Lakers, he's like, I'm the starting point guard. Well, you were going to the Lakers, who had just won the championship, who technically the starting point guard for the Lakers in 2020 was LeBron James. So now you're saying that you're better than him. I don't think he kissed LeBron's ring, and that didn't work out well. And now he's stuck with the Celtics at $5.9 million. As a player in a vacuum, yes, this is a great move. I mean, he's a quality player, but how's he going to fit in with Tatum, Brown, and I think even more importantly, if Marcus Smart's back, how those two are going to fit together?
Yeah, I think that he's a veteran, and he's been on teams. He's been on a bunch of different teams. He's been on good teams. He's been on crap teams. So he's been around the league and he's experienced. And I think what that all means to me is that he probably knows the best way of him recouping some of the money that he foolishly turned down, or his agent told him to turn down, is to contribute to winning. That's typically what gets you the bigger contracts. Now, stats are great, but I think you can look at some stats and say they're hollow stats. Teams aren't as dumb as they used to be. They can look up, if you're putting up great numbers, but your team's sucking, that's not going to really help him recoup any of the values. So I think that he understands that, and that, the guys on the team are Tatum and Brown, and his job is to help them.
But Jet, before you continue, Jet, don't you think he realized that last year when he went to what was the best team in basketball, and if he could have just filled his role? And he was offered that contract by the Lakers, and he still screwed that up. So I wonder if he's got that personality, that DNA, because we know a lot of players, as smart as they are on the court, their opinion of themselves is a bit higher than it should be, and they think they're better than they are. So I'm just wondering what that dynamic is going to be. As a player, no question, he can certainly help the Celtics as a basketball player.
Well, two things, Sap, as to why I think it might be a better situation. One is, sometimes when you do something, you fall off that pedestal, you learn from it. So it didn't work in LA last year. You would assume he wouldn't try to do the same things that, caused him to lose all this money. Also, I don't think he was that bad last year when the team was at full strength. When the Lakers had Anthony Davis and LeBron, I don't think he was that bad. He wasn't as good as he was when he was in Oklahoma City the year prior, when he was the sixth man of the year candidate. But I just think that between those two things, him hopefully learning what didn't go well in LA, and also the fact that he'll play on a team in the Celtics that will conceivably, hopefully be healthy, that could prove to be successful for the Celtics. I also think that's something that you can't discount with Schroder in terms of why it could work better in Boston is, as strange as it sounds, the presence of Al Horford. Him and Al Horford were teammates in Atlanta for a long time. In fact, I believe he was Al Horford's rookie. So we saw Horford already tweeting saying, like, oh, I'm so excited, like, welcome back, like, to the squad. Like, so I think Horford had pre-existing relationship with Schroder. One, I'm sure he probably, they vetted Schroder through Horford. Stevens probably asked, Horford, is this guy worth bringing in? And two, I think that, he's somebody that can actually, because he has a pre-existing relationship with him, say, hey, this is what we're expecting of you and this is what we want from you. And listen, this is his probably last chance for a big contract. He could keep picking up these 1-year deals, but if he has a really good year this year, he could secure a good amount of money for himself going forward. So I think it sort of behooves him to be on his best behavior. Not that he was like a problem in LA from a behavioral standpoint. He didn't play the way that they needed him to play, especially when the postseason came.
And we know how difficult it is to be the third wheel with LeBron James. Chris Bosh had to adjust. Kevin Love had to adjust. And last year it was Dennis Schroder that had to adjust. Now, you could make a case that in the championship run that Rajon Rondo, who, Schroeder's been compared to and is called the German Rondo, he may have been the Lakers' third best player in that championship run. They didn't really have a third best player that, like, from night to night, it was either KCP or it was Kuzma or it was Dwight Howard or someone. They didn't necessarily have a big three. They had a dynamic duo with a bunch of role players, but you could make a case that Rondo was the third best player on the Lakers, and that worked, right? So maybe this will work for Schroeder coming to Boston. My big question is, who is your starting point guard now? Is it Marcus Smart or is it Dennis Schroeder? And how does that work? I can't see them starting those two guys in the backcourt because Jalen Brown is one of your guards. Jason Tatum is one of your forwards. Now you have to fill in the gaps. Smart or Schroeder as your starting point guard. And then I think you go with Horford and one of the bigs up front, whether it be Robert Williams III or Moses Brown or
Moses Brown is gone now, Sap. He's gone.
Oh, he's already gone. When did this happen? Because I'm
that was part of the Josh Richardson trade. He had a very short Celtics career.
I didn't know. I was on vacation.
I'm very sorry to tell you to break the news to you.
Why? I mean, the guy was averaging a double-double last year. Like, that's the stuff that drives me nuts about the NBA. Like, give the guy a chance. I mean, you trade for Josh Richardson. So now here are the Celtics with big guys. Josh Richardson. Oh, I'm sure you do. You're going to love Richardson. You're going to love Schroeder. You're going to love, obviously, Marcus Smart's your favorite player. Chris Dunn. So you got four guys who are all kind of like, assholes or like play with an edge. So maybe they're trying to build that culture.
Prefer that than last year.
Well, yeah, at least you got some dogs out there, right? I mean, the way they shoot their dogs as well. But maybe that's what they're looking for. They're trying to build culture around Tatum and Brown. And maybe Brad Stevens just realized that Jason Tatum's not a leader. Jalen Brown's kind of a quiet leader, but we're not going to put all that pressure on these two young players. We're going to bring in Al Horford, see if he can kind of do what he did for a few years here. And let's get all these guys in the backcourt who are just, kind of Patrick Beverly types, right? Like just in your face type players. And you go from there. And then you go with the big guys, Cantor,
Rob Williams,
my man, Moses Brown. And I'm Rob Williams and Al Horford. Moses is gone. I'm just distraught. So where is Moses playing now? Is he
wandering the desert?
Moses.
I believe exactly. Dallas.
All right. Well, that's good. I kind of like Dallas, and he will lead Luka Doncic to a championship before long.
It'd be a real bummer if he turns out to be a really good player.
He averaged nearly a double-double last year in like 22 minutes. Like I know I know there's a lot of stats that are, beyond points and rebounds and blocks or whatever. And I don't know. I'm kind of just shaken right now. I just missed that one. I'm sorry.
I'm so very well.
Sorry for breaking.
I can't believe you missed that one. It was such a huge transaction.
It was a huge story. I mean, I was in the middle watching a San Francisco Giants game when the news broke. So I don't know.
Whenever those undrafted players get traded, it's really a big deal.
It's big news. Yeah.
Shame on you, Sap. But as far as you're asking me who I think should be starting point guard, I think it should be Schroder. I'm a huge Marcus Smart guy, but
yep.
I think I said this the other day, Sap, or maybe I said it to my dad when I was talking about it. I lose track. You guys,
we're both old guys. Yeah.
Old guys. Yeah, exactly. The less offensive responsibility for Marcus Smart, the better, in my opinion. Not saying Dennis Schroder is a much better offensive player than Smart. He's not. But he's a little bit better. They're both terrible shooters. Schroder, I know that he knows how to be the starting point guard on a team and be a distributor if need be. Will he accept that role? I don't know. I hope so. I think he would be a really good as a guy who drives and kicks for the Celtics. He's good at getting to the basket. He's got long arms. He's a good passer. I think if he accepts that role of play defense, run the offense as a distributor, don't shoot, they're in good shape. Marcus Smart, I think, needs to be that energy guy off the bench who you're saying play really hard defense, bring energy, enthusiasm, and I'm more comfortable with him shooting off the bench than him shooting as a starting point guard.
Okay, here's my problem with that, though, is if he comes off the bench, he's going to play less with Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, which in his mind is going to be, well, I'm going to shoot more because I'm playing with inferior players. If he's the starting point guard, they can try to hammer it into his thick head that Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown are the two dominant players on this team. So I don't know how that's going to work. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. And Ime Udoka right away has a challenge on his hands.
But he has a better roster than they had last year, at least.
It's a better roster. Without question. I mean, even Enes Kanter, who on one end of the court is phenomenal. I mean, offensively, he's got all the moves. He's an outstanding offensive rebounder. He's a disaster on the defensive end. I mean, maybe you could do like they used to do in high school girls basketball. We have, 3 on one end and 3 on the other end. And you got Robert Williams III on the defensive end, and you got Enes Kanter on the offensive end, and they don't have to cross midcourt. Although I think Robert Williams III is a very underrated offensive player. He's got a really good feel for the game and is a good passer. Obviously, he's great at the rim on alley-oops. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad they brought him here, and you know what? It's going to make them that much more interesting because he is kind of a polarizing guy, right? I mean, you go to the Lakers. It looks like the Lakers improved off of a championship run, and Schroder became kind of a scapegoat there because it's never going to be LeBron's fault. And I get that. I think it was partly Anthony Davis's fault because I don't think he was in condition when he came back, although I'll give him a little bit of slack. I'll cut him some slack because the offseason was so short. And then the rest of the guys just didn't play at the same level as they did during the championship run. So
Schroder was
I think it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Was better than the other offseason acquisition last year. Harold Schroder was better than him.
Oh, that was a disaster too. Yeah, that was a disaster. And I wasn't thrilled with those offseason moves. It looked like they had added better players, but it didn't seem to me like they had added players that would fit with LeBron. I think that, right now, who's a better player, Dwight Howard or Montrezl Harrell? Dwight Howard, to me, if you're in a championship mode, he could protect the rim a lot better than Montrezl Harrell can.
Yeah,
I think an energy guy and all those things.
I think last offseason, I gave the Lakers a lot of credit. I think I got too carried away with the names and not enough with the fit.
The names.
And I think a lot of people did too. I'll take responsibility for that because I think I was just looking at the names and saying, wow, Schroder, Harold, these guys finished 1 and 2 and 6th man of the year. They're going to the defending champions. Great move by the Lakers, but they didn't fit just as well. And you know what? Honestly, it may not have mattered had Anthony Davis and LeBron both been fully healthy. They could have won the championship, and those guys may not have fitted as well, but they could have won a title. But health impact was the biggest reason they didn't go as far as they did was health, not Schroder, not Harrell. Right. It was health.
Nope. Exactly. I mean, but healthy, those two guys healthy, I think they win the championship.
If I'm the Celtics, this is my ideal starting lineup, and we'll see what they end up coming up with. It's funny, training camp's right around the door because, the season ended so late. They're in summer league right now. I'd start Schroder, as I said. Then I have Brown at the 2, Tatum at the 3, Horford at the 4, and Rob Williams at the 5. I think that's a very good starting lineup. And then your two guys off the bench, first two guys off the bench are Smart and Richardson, and and Cantor's maybe your other guy off the bench. I mean, that's a decent rotation there. Pritchard, another guy who's playing fabulous in the summer league, and then you have Neesmith and Langford who are showing some signs of life in the summer league. So listen, we talked about this a lot last year, Sep. The roster was devoid of talent last year. It was a real talent suck.
Yeah.
And they're I'm not going to say they're really deep, but they're certainly deeper. And as much as I bash him, and I don't think that he deserved the job, and I think that it was a cheap move for the Celtics to hire Brad Stevens, I think he had a lot of mess to clean up from Danny Ainge. And in a limited time, I think he has created a significantly improved roster. Are they a championship roster? No, I don't think so. But they're better than last year where they're a 500 team. I think that the moves that they made have put them in position to be far more competitive and cohesive this year than last year, where they don't have to play a guy like Grant Williams constantly.
That starting five is very intriguing to me, and I would agree with you on that. The only thing is, what's Marcus Smart's reaction going to be? Because I think Marcus Smart, who's come off the bench for a long portion of his career, may look like, I'm the next man up. I should be the starting point guard. So how is that all going to work out? I'm sure. I think you make a great point that Al Horford must have been consulted to find out about Dennis Schroder, and is he going to fit in? What's the situation going to be? And I think Ime Udoka is going to be up to the challenge. He's a commanding guy, isn't he, Ime Udoka? I mean, he played in the league. He obviously wasn't an all-star. He was a role player, but he's about 6'6", 6'7", good-looking guy. I mean, I think he could kind of command a room, right? I think we can agree on that.
Yeah,
and that's what he's probably going to have to do.
Medal.
Yeah, I mean, he's coached on the Nets last year. He's coached in Philadelphia. So he's been around stars. He's been in high leverage situations, again, as an assistant coach, not as a head coach. But that's what he's going to have to do. He's going to have to be the guy who, isn't afraid to sit Marcus Smart or Dennis Schroder or whoever down and say, this is what the role is going to be. Let's accept it. And in the case of Dennis Schroder, like you pointed out, if this works out, you'll get paid, whether it's from the Celtics or some other team, because he's still basically, a young player. He's good 27, 28 years old. So he's got plenty of years left here. It's not like he's an ancient guy. So it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, I think the talent on the roster is better than it was, because you don't want to see Grant Williams, Neesmith and Langford. We'll see. I mean, if you throw enough shit up against the wall, some of it will stick.
Right.
And we'll see what happens with those guys. But I think it's a fascinating move, because it's going to be worth watching. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that the Celtics weren't in a position to turn down talent, and the money was so short, and the years obviously just one. It's a natural win. Even if he doesn't work out, it was worth the risk, because the year is just 1 year and it's short money, and you need talent anyway. So they're not in a position to say, oh, well, this guy might not fit perfectly well. You need talent. Bring in whatever talent you can and try to figure it out afterwards. So it's sort of a beggars can't be choosers situation for both Schroeder and the Celtics. It's, Schroeder didn't want to be in this position where he has to sign on short money on a short contract, but this is a good team that he can take that could potentially go on a deep-ish playoff run that will make him look good. Mm-hmm. So it puts him in a good situation to potentially earn something back. It's a mercenary situation. He's not coming back the year after, and they don't want him back the next year. So for 1 year, it might work out really well. And I think that the Celtics were wise to be able to bring him in, and, fortunate also that he screwed himself over monetarily and to bring him in. Sap, another Celtics related thing before we move on was, do you remember a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a month or so ago, there was a report that Brown and Tatum like each other, but aren't really friends. And we were talking about how that was possibly a concern. Well, I see that the first person that Jason Tatum comes back and sees after he wins his gold medal in Japan is Jalen Brown. They're hanging out at the NBA Players Association event. Jalen Brown takes his medal, taking pictures with it, hiding it from him. They seem like friends to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, Kevin McHale and Larry Bird weren't friends. Larry Bird always said that Kevin McHale never took the game seriously enough. Now, coming from the mouth of Larry Bird, no one took the game seriously enough for Larry Bird. I mean, he literally ate, drank, slept basketball. I mean, in addition to his phenomenal talent, the work ethic and the desire were just off the charts. And McHale was more of a fun-loving, easygoing guy who, would rather spend Christmas morning with his family, then with his basketball team in New York. And I always back McHale on that because, you're a dad first. Larry Bird didn't understand that. The team was in New York to play the Knicks on Christmas Day, and where was Kevin McHale? So they don't have to be best friends. I think they're kind of different personalities. Jaylen Brown is more of a deep thinker. I think Jason Tatum is learning to be a leader, but he's miles away from being that. And I think that's a pretty cool story that they were hanging out together. And I'm just going to blame Danny Ainge for everything. I mean, he's no longer here, so why not? Just blame Danny Ainge for, it just seems like anything that was effed up, let's just blame him. I mean, and maybe Rick Grossbeck kind of knew about this and said, well, it's not really Brad Stevens' fault that this thing's falling apart. It's Danny Ainge. And now Ainge is gone and Stevens has replaced him, and you bring in a coach that a lot of people like in Ime Udoka, and maybe it's going to work. And maybe everybody's just kind of relaxed and feeling like they can move on and try to contend. They're not going to win a title, but, at least maybe be a 4 or 5 seed in the Eastern Conference and look like they are challenging the best teams, not necessarily beating the best teams, but at least not being embarrassed on the court. So yeah, that's a pretty good story. I mean, I've seen interviews with them together. They seem to be fine. The only problem is, it's not often that your 2 best players are essentially the same age, right? There's usually some sort of gap with that. Like when Scottie Pippen showed up to the Bulls, he's 3 years younger than Jordan, and there was no question who the alpha was. It was Jordan. Even Bird and McHale never looked at himself as Bird's equal. He was quite content being the second or third best player on the team. Same thing with James Worthy, who had both Kareem and Magic on his team. With Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they're both a year apart in age. They're they're trying to find their way together, and that can be difficult. That's why I think it's important. Maybe Al Horford's going to be that leader that they need, and maybe Ime Udoka, who's been around a lot of stars, right? I mean, just coaching the Olympic team proves that. Not to mention Philadelphia and Brooklyn.
Well, and Sap,
maybe he's equipped to handle that.
This sounds odd to say, he's black too. I mean, that's something that
absolutely.
Brad Stevens could never relate to. Brad Stevens is the whitest person next to me in the world. So I think that
he's more white. Yeah, I mean he's like Midwestern, like apple pie,
white,
Chevrolet. Yeah, you're Jewish. That's like we accept you into the Italian culture, right? You're an honorary member of the Paisan Club, right? So
I'm just saying part of coaching is relating to your players.
Here's the thing: he's the least ethnic guy.
Yes.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like I can't picture if he tried to be hip, it would sound comical, right? Like Pat Riley, who's Irish American, but he's kind of cool. Right. I mean, he was always cool.
With the slick back.
He's Scarface. Exactly. The black guys loved him. I mean, whereas Brad Stevens he's definitely suburban, right? Like he's
like a elementary school principal.
That's what it feels like. Yeah. More so. Yeah. I mean, you want your daughter to marry him or whatever. I always equated him to like a future U.S. senator. He's got that great temperament. And look, his doppelganger is Pete Buttigieg, who I supported for president in 2020, but Pete's not exactly the hippest guy himself. So I think that's a great point.
All right, let's end the show, Sep, talking about a little bit of summer league action last night as we saw perhaps a blossoming new rivalry between the Pistons and Rockets, not because either of those teams are relevant right now, but because they have the number 1 and 2 picks in the draft. Cade Cunningham faced off against Jalen Green last night. The Rockets and Green got the better of Cunningham's Pistons. Green goes for 25 points and 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Cunningham, 20 points, 4 rebounds, 3 steals, and 2 assists. And the Rockets win that game 111-91. Sap, did you catch this one at all?
Yeah, a little bit. And I was impressed with both players. And I think you could see that Jalen Green, by playing in the G League, has a leg up over Cade Cunningham. Cunningham playing in college basketball last year. When you're playing in the G League, you're playing against grown men. And I think that you can see that Jalen Green was up and running quicker than, say, Cade Cunningham.
Grown men playing for contracts, too. I mean, they're hungry.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a little different than college. So I look at these two players, and the first thing I can think of is they kind of model their games after two of the all-time great players we've ever seen, and I'm sure probably their favorite players growing up. you could see Cade Cunningham probably loves LeBron James because he's got that well-rounded game. He can pass, facilitate. He can score in a multitude of ways. He's not a great outside shooter, but he's got a fantastic feel for the game. You can see Jalen Green, I'm just guessing, probably loved Kobe Bryant. He's got that, I hate using this term, the Mamba mentality, but he's a scorer. And, you know, he was, 11 of 12 from the free throw line, which, you know, if that translates that to the NBA, you know, look out, this kid's going to be sensational. It almost felt like we were watching the next generation of LeBron and Kobe. Not to say they're going to be as good, but it seems like they both modeled their games after those two great players who probably were their favorite players. They're both going to be sensational. Evan Mobley's going to be really good. And you know what I think of Jalen Suggs, I think he's going to be spectacular.
You're doing what you said you hated about the draft, Sap, that every player is going to be really good. Odds are one of those players is going to not be good.
I know. I sound like Jay Billis here. Everybody's great.
Right. What draft has 1 through 5 all been good?
Never. I mean, even the 03 draft, you had Darko Milicic was the second pick. The rest of the top 5 was damn good. But yeah, there's always one in there that are like, how did that guy get drafted number 2? I know there's a player that got drafted who's one of the older players that got drafted who you are absolutely in love with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, on the Kings,
you've already
Davion Mitchell.
You've already got a poster of him up there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's
up there yet?
A dog. And I just love the way he plays. He's so aggressive. And, like, I think it's so annoying probably for players to play against him because they're like, it's summer league. Just, you know, let me get past
Chill.
you. And he's like, he's full court pressing. He's, you know, up in people's face. He's awesome. I love him. But it was fun watching
and he's skilled on the offensive end.
Very
he's
skilled.
Not just a guy who is very skilled on the offensive end. That's a really intriguing backcourt, right? With De'Aaron Fox
and him and Halliburton. The Kings are a mess. Of course, they have 3 really good players. They all play the same position. Like only the Kings would that happen.
Right, exactly.
You've hit the draft pick, but you keep drafting the same position. They can't get out of their own way.
They did the right thing with Davion Mitchell because at that point I'm like, you got to grab him. He's going to be. You figure it out at that point. I mean, it's you know, in baseball you draft shortstops and you move some of them to center field or third base.
Yeah, no, it's funny.
I mean, it's intriguing.
They hit on Fox. They hit on Halliburton last year, and I believe they'll hit on Mitchell. But the most important pick they had was the number 2 pick a couple of years ago when they took Bagley, and they whiffed so badly on that where they could have had Trae Young, another point guard, or obviously Luka. And so, you know, you give them credit for the 3 that they look like they hit. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself with Davion Mitchell here, but they definitely hit on Halliburton and Fox. We know that. But man, the Bagley thing was just this. Imagine how good they would be with Luka and these guys.
Oh, that would be a great supporting cast for Luka, right?
Luka and Fox would be a fun team. It'd be a fun team.
Oh, yeah, because Luka can kind of blend in and do what he needs to do. Maybe he wouldn't have as many assists because he's got De'Aaron Fox, but he may score more or rebound more or whatever. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Unfortunately, being Sacramento, but look, in the late 90s, early 2000s, Sacramento was must-watch TV, right? When you had Chris Webber and those guys going to the conference finals on it felt like a yearly basis, and they would, you know, run up against the Lakers and lose close games. But yeah, I think these young players look really good. Fixed games, true. Yes, absolutely. A lot of people kind of think that was the case. But yeah, I was impressed with those players. But again, it's summer league. You can only get so excited. I mean, it's not facing
Aaron Nesmith
NBA
scored
players.
33 last game, Sap. You don't think he's going to do that in the NBA?
Oh, I think I have no question he'll average that. I'm higher on him than Romeo Langford, though.
Right? I am too, because one of those guys can shoot and the other one can't.
One can shoot. And I tell you, watching a little bit of the Celtics last night in the Summer League, I give Brian Scalabrine a lot of credit. I don't know if he's reinvented himself since last year. He's much more critical of the Celtics. He was talking about Romeo Langford and saying, yeah, he's a skilled guy. He just doesn't play hard enough. That's good analysis, you know, saying that, because that's not
Celtics
something you would hear in the past.
Are not happy with Brian Scalabrine. If you go to the Celtics Twitter or you go to the Celtics Reddit, they think they think he's too negative, which is, you know, funny, but they don't like that he's dismissive of Abby Chin, which is an interesting thing to be upset about. I haven't even noticed that.
A little bit. I mean, he's kind of an arrogant guy, and I've talked to, like, my brother loves basketball. He's older than I am. He goes, who the hell is Brian Scalabrine? I mean, he talks like he invented the game. And it's like, well, no, usually the really good analysts are guys that were marginal players. Like Michael Jordan would have been the worst analyst. We saw Magic Johnson was horrible, right? I mean,
no, he's good on Twitter at analyzing.
Yeah, he's great on Twitter. He's got all the obvious stuff out there. So, but I give Scalabrine credit. He was basically saying, yeah, Romeo Langford just doesn't play hard enough. And that's a skill. So I give him credit. I mean, if you really want to hear, Baghdad Bob, just tune into Nesson and listen to Lenny DiNardo on the Red Sox games. It's like nothing bad has happened to the Red Sox as they're blowing the division and maybe even the wild card. They're like, 2-10 over the last 12, and Lenny DiNardo sees nothing but good things. Get Eckersley back and let's get Jerry Remy healthy again, because those guys are great.
Yeah, obviously our well wishes to Jerry Remy. It sucks that he's had a tough go of it the past decade. Really, really tough for Jerry. So our well wishes to him. But yeah, I enjoyed this Rockets Pistons game, not because of the game was particularly exciting, but it was nice to see these future stars of the NBA. And I agree with you. I think they're both going to be stars. I don't think 1 through 5 like you was going to be great players.
No.
But I certainly see a lot of Kobe and Tracy McGrady in Jalen Green's game. And I do see some LeBron in Cade Cunningham's game. Not the passer. Obviously, LeBron is not. It's unfair to compare anybody to LeBron because nobody's ever been like him. It'd be like if Magic Johnson was also the best athlete in the league. It kind of makes no sense.
That's what I've said about LeBron James for years. When people push back and me calling him the greatest basketball player ever, go, he has a similar skill set to Magic Johnson, except he's a better scorer, a far better athlete, and a much better defender. And yet he does all the other things as well as Magic, including leadership. And Magic, to me, is the 5th or 6th best player in the history of the sport, and this guy's that much better. So that's where I go at it with that. You're right. I mean, Cade Cunningham is nowhere near the athlete LeBron is, nowhere near the passer. He's not going to finish at the rim like LeBron, but he's got that feel that he seems like a guy.
Nobody is.
No, there's one of a kind, right? I mean, like as great as Michael Jordan was, Kobe came along and was 92% of Michael. That's pretty close, right? You're never going to see another guy that's 6'9", 260 with the IQ that LeBron has. He's a unicorn.
No, honestly, the guy who's most similar to him in the NBA right now is probably Luka, and Luka's not nearly the athlete LeBron is.
No, or defender. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think that they probably have the most well-rounded offensive games. I mean, Durant's the best scorer. No one's going to debate that, and Steph's the best shooter. But in terms of scoring and creativity and passing, Luka and LeBron are the 2 best in the league. But then you go on the other end of the court, LeBron's a shutdown defender, and Luka's kind of weak there. And when LeBron, he's 36 now. I mean, go back to the Miami days. He should have been Defensive Player of the Year multiple times. But, he got robbed.
He takes it off in the regular season. When you see the defenses in the postseason. It's a regular season award, Sap.
That's true, too. He's there for the chase down block of Andre Iguodala, which Skip Bayless, of course, calls the most overrated player in the history of the NBA. Which,
Giannis's block was
Skip
better.
Bayless. I don't think so.
The Skip went back and forth on that one, too. First, he said it sucked, then he said it was amazing. Yeah, he's changed his mind.
He doesn't like Giannis either. I mean, he's still on Durant. I mean, Durant's his guy. And actually, I do have a column up on Full Press Coverage. I rank the top 10 players in the NBA, and that's going to be a future podcast. We go in descending order from 10 down to 1. So I think that's going to be our next podcast. After tomorrow, when we have Pete Croatto on, who has a fabulous new book that we're going to talk to him about tomorrow.
This guy right here. Yeah, we're going to talk to Pete tomorrow. I know we teased that on a previous podcast, and you'll be able to listen to that tomorrow. So that's going to do it, I think, for us here, Sap. That's our Summer League analysis here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage, and we'll be back tomorrow with author Pete Croatto and talking about his book in the NBA. And we'll be back, constantly telling you more stuff that's going on in the offseason because the NBA, as you know, never stops. So thanks for listening, everybody. Find our podcast wherever podcasts are found, and check us out for the latest show updates and musings on Twitter at JohnSap25, at JetStryer. See you, everybody.